Cool. Welcome, everyone. I don't know which camera I'm here. Yeah, welcome to this hybrid version of the Power BI and Excel user group. As you probably know, that our presenter tonight is Darren Gosbell, who is the author and kind of owner manager. He runs the DAX Studio product, and he's going to tell us all about that. And it's going to be quite. I'm really looking forward to that. I just want to mention that tomorrow night we've got some lightning talks happening. You can find these on Meetup. I believe it's online only. And what these lightning talks are, it's a collection of various user groups around the Wellington area. So there's a PowerShell one. There's a bunch of other ones. I think Andre's actually on this call. So if you want to maybe unmute and describe who exactly is going to be there. But I believe these are 10 and 15 minute talks from experts on their specialist subjects. So have a look for that. I don't know the exact kickoff time, but I just want to call it out. It's probably something well worth having a look for, happening tomorrow night here in Wellington. Unfortunately, the Power BI Excel group couldn't get organised to prepare anything, but you get us tonight, and tomorrow you get all the other fantastic content. So
yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, it's Andre. Yeah, so I just send the link on the message. If you are interested, all the guys, if you're interested in a talk, it's tomorrow 6 p.m. It will be only online, no recording for that session. There will be, as you mentioned, there will be 7 user groups, Wellington Microsoft user groups together. There will be lightning talk, 10 minutes each session, and 5 minutes for the Q&A. And on the end, there is a prize for one guy, or one person who actually stands till end. And yes, so it's an awesome prize for one person. Yeah. And more information you can find on the link which I sent in the message. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. All right. So yeah, look out for that. So before we start with Darren, what we'll do is we'll quickly dive into what's new with Jonathan. So I don't know if you can present or...
Nothing to present.
Nothing to present. Okay.
I'm sorry. But another month of updates. And so this month we got like a lot of things, but the things that stood up to me were the model view for live connection. So now when you connect to a Power BI data set using live connection and Power BI desktop, you now can actually see the relationships in the tables, which is incredibly helpful. Wondering exactly how this model is being constructed. So within the Power BI desktop experience, you can now see that, which is a big time saver for me personally. We've also got a new mobile view creator. So when you go to create mobile views of your reports, there's a new phone emulator that helps you create the report that will fit into the compact screen of a phone. Still not a huge fan of phone reports, but if you do that, it's easier now. The featured tables in Excel, where you can bring Power BI dataset data into Excel seamlessly, now supports row level security. So if your model is set up for row level security, that will work now. And the modern ribbon UI has gone GA. So the modern Office ribbon experience is now generally available. So should be bug free, I would hope. But that's kind of it, really. Some other new features in June.
Okay, awesome. So, as you know, tonight we're going to be hearing from Darren Gosbell. He basically built and manages DAX Studio. Now, in my team and in the engineering team at in Microsoft and Corp, not just the Power BI engineers, but the analysis services engineers, this is their must-use go-to tool. Everyone uses DAX Studio whenever they're doing anything serious when it comes to DAX. It's so full of so many useful little bits and pieces that I'm still figuring out how to use or get the best out of them. So I've been really looking forward to this session, probably as much as anyone. Now, if you have any questions during the while Darren's talking, please just put them into the chat window, and Jeff will keep his eye on that. But certainly at the end, we'll have the opportunity if you don't want to type and you want to come off mic and you want to ask Darren about anything in today's session, or about anything to do with DAX Studio, or anything about DAX, or because Darren is a long-time MVP. I think he's been in the BI world as longer than anyone I know. He's one of the how long have you been really actively in? 15 years? More?
Yeah, 2006.
Yeah, okay. So
Awarded,
there's a
I
lot
think.
of experience there. So absolutely, any questions you have about data modeling, DAX, MDX, even then, please feel free to fire those through on the chat window, Jeff, to Jeff, or we'll have some time at the end. So that's enough from me. So I'll hand it over to Darren to introduce himself, and look forward to your session. So over to you, Darren.
Lovely, thanks, Phil. So I've got like 2 slides or something to, and then we're just going to jump into DAX Studio and have a bit of a wander around. Yeah, I've been working in the BI field since 1999. I think when I applied for that job, I had to look up what the word OLAP stood for, because I was completely green in the field, but I've been loving it ever since. And I've been a MVP since 2006. I run the local Microsoft Data Platform user group here in Melbourne, Australia. And I've got a number of little open source tools that you may have heard of. Prior to DAX Studio, I also started the BIDS Helper project, which is now that the development tools for SQL Server are no longer called BIDS, they're called SSDT. We've sort of renamed to the more generic BI developer extensions. I've also done a bit of work on the Analysis Services Stored Procedure project, which was some C# stored procedures that run inside multi-dimensional servers. But yeah, my current passion is working with DAX Studio, and I've often got the source code open on my machine and duck in and out of it and add things. And often chatting to Marco and Alberto at SQL BI, they're incredible source of knowledge, and Marco contributes a little bit to DAX Studio and has often got great ideas for features and things. So one of my other passions though is boomerangs. Here's my collection of boomerangs, especially with the I'm currently working from home and have been since early March. So if I can and it's not too windy outside, I'll grab a couple of boomerangs, go for a walk at lunchtime down to the local park and throw some of these. And if I'm lucky, I can catch some of them. So yeah, little something about me. So Phil said not to spend too much time preparing. So I've largely jotted down a bunch of features and things that we can wander through. DAX Studio first started in about 2012. I was originally contemplating calling it Power Pivot Helper, because at the time the only thing that had the tabular engine in it was Power Pivot. So we originally started as just an Excel add-in that ran in Excel, and you could have a little text box, no IntelliSense. I think we did have metadata window, and that was about it. And then over the years, as Microsoft's expanded the tabular engine and added it to analysis services, and then added it to what was originally called Power BI Designer and is now known as Power BI Desktop, we sort of continued to enhance and expand the product. It was largely sort of grew out of just an interest in DAX and learning more about it, but also especially back in the early days, they didn't have a DAX window in Management Studio. There was no way to run the queries. It was really a passing comment at one of the MVP summits where one of the program managers mentioned, oh no, that DAX was a full query language. You could type evaluate in. That sort of triggered this off, and sort of grown to where it is today. I think our last big release, we got close to 50,000 downloads on it, so it gets a reasonable amount of use. And like Phil was saying, I've even had sort of contact from some of the developers of the tabular engine. They'll often have DAX Studio open, and as they're building functionality in the engine, they'll run a debug version and connect to it with DAX Studio. So it's pretty sort of fun thing to find out. Yeah, so I thought I'd start off showing you one of the newer features, which is the query builder. I've sort of highlighted some of these things in bold that I think might make interesting things to talk about. Hopefully people have seen the metadata tooltips. The query builder's new, so we'll have a look at that. Parameters can be interesting if you're working with paginated reports. And some of the other things we've got, we've actually got probably close to 4.5, 5 hours of videos on the Power BI tips. They've got a DAX Studio channel. And I've got a link in this slide deck, so I can share that out with Phil as well. There's a few links I've got to share around. So rather than me just talking to PowerPoint, why don't we get rid of that and have a look in DAX Studio. So this is the DAX Studio interface. When you first fire it up, it'll start with this connection window. We're able to connect to a number of different data sources. The Power Pivot models, there is a little tooltip, and I should have started Zoom it before this. So let me fire up Zoom it. As it says here, DAX Studio needs to be launched from inside Excel. So we have an Excel add-in. It gives you an extra button on your toolbar, and when you launch from there, you can connect back to a Power Pivot model in Excel. Main reason for that is that Power Pivot doesn't expose any sort of external ports. So to connect to it, you need to be running inside Excel. So that's probably one of the few areas where we sort of use a slightly undocumented way of connecting, but everything else is now documented. Even the connections to Power BI Desktop, the Microsoft support people often use this, and so the ability of connecting to the running instance of Tabular Engine behind your desktop is now a documented and supported feature. So I've got one workbook open here with AdventureWorks in it. You can also connect to tabular servers. So this lets you connect to anything. Like I've got a named instance called Tab 17, which is my SQL Server 2017 instance. You can also connect to named instances. You can put in the connection string for an Azure analysis services or Power BI XML endpoints in here, and they all work. No, that doesn't work because that's not. If I connect to my local tabular instance, establishes a connection, you'll see it's picked up a connection to AdventureWorks database, and it loads the metadata in the pane on the left. So you can swap between various models. On something like analysis services, if you connected to Power BI Desktop, there is just a single database, and that there's not a lot of functionality in connecting there. So one thing we do, actually, an interesting feature we've added recently is we've added mouse wheel support on most things. So if you hold down Control on your keyboard and zoom with your mouse wheel, it'll zoom in on the window that the mouse is over, so I can zoom in and out. Quite handy for demos like this, or if you're working on a different sized screen, you can zoom in and out. Another thing I've tried to add is these tooltips. So you'll see this is a tooltip for a table. It shows you the description, number of columns. If I expand columns, you can see when I go to address. Oh, why isn't my screen zooming? Just trying to capture that with zoom it so that it'll, there it goes. Hold it still so the tooltip won't go away. So we show a bunch of interesting information here. We show you the unique name of the column you're hovering over. We show you the data type, the number of distinct values in this column, the minimum and maximum. And it's probably happened too quick to see it, but the sample data here, it does a little top 10 to give you a sample of the data, and that's populated asynchronously. So as you hover over it, so if you're on a slightly slower connection, you might see sample data start up empty and then pop in sort of a few hundred milliseconds later, hopefully. So that helps give you, I've used that a few times, especially when you're working with an unfamiliar model and you go, what do they mean commute distance? Is that numeric value? Is it a string? So that can be quite a handy way to sort of browse around the model and just get a quick idea what's in there.
Darren, is there any way to populate with some kind of metadata to put it in words, what that means in business language from a model?
To put in, I mean like an
explanation of commute distance, for instance.
Yeah, so all of the columns and all of the tables, you can see one there for customer. It's got the, I always get the wrong key with snag it. Yeah, so I grab the description, which you can see under there. So it's got the customer as the name of the table, customer is also the unique name, but this holds customer information is in the description in my model.
Gotcha.
So if you, we've got a few models at work where we've actually used master data services to pull the unique names out, populate it into master data services, and then we can populate descriptions and we feed it back into the model. So we can use that so the business people can help update some of these descriptions. But yeah, awesome. They will appear in the same place as the table, just under the unique name. I'll show a description if there's one on the model. The other thing we've got is there's a bunch of, as we've sort of added features over the year, I've often added options. It's almost got to the point, or has got to the point now where I'm looking at redesigning this page because there's a lot of options now on the one page. So I want to add some sort of search functionality if I can. But one thing we have in the advanced tab are these preview features. So I've got these turned on. One we're going to have a quick look at now is the query builder button. So this is a new feature that sort of came out in the 2.11 version. So when you turn that on, you see back in the toolbar, it pops up with the query builder button in the main ribbon. What this does is pop up this window next to your metadata. And that lets you quite simply build a query. It's very similar to the table visual in Power BI. So I can start dragging gender and marital status. And then I can go looking for a measure. I know we've got, I think it's the total sales. I can drag measures in. And once I've done that, I've got, yeah, I can zoom that one a bit so it's a bit easier to read. And down the bottom, as part of this query builder, you've got the option to just directly run the query. So I can run that, so it should show us gender and marital status and give us the internet total sales. See that result down there. So that's very quickly given me a way of seeing males and females, the married, the single, and internet total sales. So that's not much more than you would have seen in Power BI. Where it starts to become interesting is you can add a new measure to that. So this is called my measure. I can call it something different. So I can start typing and use the IntelliSense to complete. And I can add a static value of 10, just as an example. And if I rerun that, I've now got my measure, which is 10 more than the other column. In addition to just adding new measures, you'll see that the The measure expression here has a little edit button next to it as well. That actually pulls the expression out of the cube, out of the model. And then you can make changes to that as well. And that if I run that, that's now given us half of our internet sales. So in addition to just being able to run it, you can also have a look at how I've generated the query. So you can click Edit Query. And we can now see how it's built out the query. So this is using the summarize columns function. It's defined the internet sales measure using the overridden expression. So this hasn't changed the measure in my model. This is using the altered expression, sum of sales amount divided by 2, just in the context of this query. So this can be a good way of testing a slightly different version of your logic, or potentially performance tuning if you want to try a different approach and test the performance. You can do it just within the context of this query without having to go in and save your model and Alt-Tab back and forwards. So previously you could have written this out by hand and overridden the measure and tested things that way, but the query builder gives you a nice fast way of editing stuff. So in addition to dragging columns and filters in, you can do things like drag a filter in. I think the AdventureWorks is quite old. I'm trying to think what would be a good date. What are we up to? We're in June 30, aren't we? But if I pick a year, say 2013, that should run, and that's, see those, I know that top internet total sales was 4,000 something, and it's now 3,000. I can get rid of this query and have a look at how that built the query. If you generated a similar thing in Power BI, you'd see it would probably define some variables and inject a variable here. I'm pushing the filter directly into the summarize columns because that works with a few more of the downstream clients, some of the older versions of the tabular engine. And I'm doing some date parsing in the C# behind here. So I try and take your local date format and then convert it into a date expression in DAX. So in theory, this should work even if you're running on some sort of crazy date format like Americans use. I don't know who puts month first in a date, but so yeah, that's the query builder in a nutshell.
Hey, Darren, that's really powerful. What was the motivation, or where did you get the idea to actually? Would have been quite a lot of work to add this to DAX Studio. Were you getting a lot of requests for something like this, or was it a personal desire for your own usage to add this kind of functionality?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad because I had the metadata pane and stuff already. It wasn't too bad to build, but it was. I suppose this is one I hadn't really had a lot of requests for a query builder as such, but I know that there were a few people getting confused with how to start with writing DAX, and we'd sometimes see people write evaluate, and they just have the expression that they wanted to evaluate, and that doesn't work in DAX because this is a scalar expression that returns a single value, whereas evaluate expects something that returns a table.
Yeah, so I did exactly that when I very first used DAX Studio, however many years ago. I got confused and I wasn't sure how to get a result. So I think it's not uncommon for people to stumble like that. So I definitely did.
Yeah, so it's something both for the early learners. You can then open the query builder and do some drag and drop. And if you want to create a measure, it's click on new, and then you can edit using the same sort of the same editor. It's got the same IntelliSense and everything else. I was actually I did a webcast on the query builder. So there's a longer, I think it's a 45-minute or so, where I was chatting to Mike Carlo at Power BI Tips.
Yeah.
So there's a recording of that up. I think he's put it up on YouTube. I haven't checked.
I think he definitely has. Yeah.
About the query builder, and afterwards I was saying probably one of the features that took me the longest to get right was the little animation that pops out. You'll see there's it pops out and goes boing, and it slides in and out from left to right, just to give you just so you know that it's come out of the query builder, and where this little edit window's popped up from. That probably took me as long as some of the other features, like getting the little filters window working. But yeah, the query builder, it probably has something for advanced users that know. I know how to write measures, but I can. I've written plenty of queries where I've built something like this by hand, but it can take you a couple of minutes versus the few seconds it takes to drag and drop. So it's something for both ends of the audience. If you're just getting started and you don't know how to write DAX, you can let the tool write it for you. And even if you know what you're doing, I just want to get to the point where I've got enough rows to give me a good test case to test my measure. It's quite a good way of building stuff out. So, but we do have.
You can edit that, Darren, and put, like, I don't know, a treat as or something or other in there. There's nothing stopping you from.
Yeah, you're now in the. Yep. You could add your own filter using treat as and start typing blue and product table, and there should be a color somewhere. This, I think, would have to be a table.
Yeah.
So that should give us. Didn't like that. So I hit F5 then, which is the same. The only difference is that to run the text that's in here, you would use the normal run button, which is up there.
You're just missing a comma, Darren.
Shortcut, which is F5.
Yeah.
There we go, and then we've got blue internet sales. So if we read that was probably in the error message, wasn't it? Saying it was syntax for total internet sales. So that's the other thing we do is that you'll see there's a little squiggle here. This is the location. So it's read through this query row 11, number 5. There's an error somewhere around that character 5 in the 11th row, 11th line. Which, yeah, it's missing the comma. So yeah.
Good live demo of the IntelliSense error highlighting.
And I actually
show how to save that back to the model again. I think you showed before, but I'm just curious how you save this measure.
Oh, so you'd actually DAX Studio is pretty much read only. You can save this document. But if you wanted to save, if I wanted to save this back, I would then go back into Analysis Services or Tabular Editor or Power BI and copy and paste that measure back in.
Okay.
Or if I was editing,
is that what the hardening project for Power BI is? Is that they're going to ultimately allow you to write back to it, or is that a dream?
Yeah. Yeah, and so Tabular Editor will have the ability to save back. There's currently no, at the moment I've got define measure. I can't really write like an alter statement in DAX at the moment. You'd have to write that either as XML or JSON of some sort. So I am toying with the idea of whether I build some sort of meta language over the top, maybe something built-in comments to do an alter measure, so you could run something from DAX Studio that would then go and try and find internet total sales and update its expression, but that's probably a fair way down the track. But yeah, now that they are hardening it, Power BI, it probably makes a bit more sense. I've held off in the past from sort of doing writes, particularly the analysis services that has SSDT or SSDT. So you've got the Visual Studio tools, and you can check into source control. And so most of my bigger projects have been, we've had cubes and the source has been checked into source control. So doing direct write backs to analysis services, while it's possible, didn't make a lot of sense. And the other tools like Power BI Desktop or Power Pivot, it made more sense to be able to write back a measure, but you couldn't actually do it without blowing things up. I did try getting it working with Power Pivot and corrupted a number of workbooks, and they explode in a spectacular fashion, and you can't open them again once you've wrecked them that way. So yeah, I had to take copies of my Excel workbooks and experimented, but yeah, it's just, I mean, Microsoft never built it to be accessible from external tools, so it was really undocumented stuff I was hacking away at. But it's really nice to see them opening up desktop and doing some hardening work to allow third-party tools to work with it. But yeah, I was going to say, off the comment, Phil was saying whether the query builder had come from a request. I have added buttons to the help menu to request a feature and report a bug. That just takes you straight into our GitHub page. I've got there's quite a few sort of things open at the moment. DAX Studio is open source. It's up on GitHub, and there's issues. There's like 54 open issues at the moment. So someone recently had issues downloading. I know that's a problem for some people because DAX Studio doesn't have what they call I think it's enhanced verification certificate, an EV certificate. The smart screen filter in Windows 10 does warn you that DAX Studio is not commonly downloaded and it could potentially be harmful. I'm investigating ways of getting around that. But yeah, at the moment, DAX Studio is signed with a code signing certificate, but it's not an enhanced code signing. It's just a standard one.
But say, Darren, for arguments, if I'm using DAX Studio and I come across something that doesn't seem quite right, I can go to this page and I can click the green new issue button, type in and it'll basically get in front of your eyeballs and you can size it up and prioritize it, and someone else might actually come along and work with the code and fix it potentially.
Yeah, potentially. It's usually me, but we do have I have had some pull requests from other people as well, where other people have fixed some issues and corrected certain things.
And you're quite happy with that? You actually quite like someone else, contributing and helping out on the product?
Yeah, and it's worth. I've got a few things on the boil at the moment too, so I'd usually encourage people to start from an issue, so it's something that I'm aware of, rather than I'd hate for someone to work in the dark for a couple of months and come up with a big feature and go here, and I go, I've sort of changed all of that. but yeah, happy to sort of to work with people. It's a reasonably large code base, and there's a few complexities in there from having sort of been around since 2012. But yeah, we've had a number of contributions. Even there's an export data feature, which was not something that was very high on my list of things to do. But there was an MVP out of Europe, Rui Romano, who helped code up a lot of this. I did a little bit of UI cleanup, but he did all of the heavy lifting. So there's the ability to take this tabular model I'm connect to and export it to SQL tables. So I have a local instance called SQL 17. For demos, I often stick things in tempdb because I know when I restart my instance, it'll go away. I can change the schema where it's put into. If these standard connection things don't meet your needs, there's an option to edit the connection string manually, but you can just walk through next. You can choose to not export certain fields or certain tables. And then you can click export and it'll go through and push all of your data out of your tabular model back into SQL where hopefully it came from in the first place. But I know especially with Power BI, though, people do a lot of complex ETL logic inside their Power Query, and some people like to be able to, they're sort of using Power Query as an ETL tool and they want to be able to get the data out. So this has had surprisingly more usage than I would have first expected, and been quite popular. So what else have we got? Oh, one other feature that often doesn't get a lot of love is the parameter support. So a lot of people may not even be aware that DAX supports parameters, but I've just created a parameter here called color, and you'll see the syntax highlighting has picked that up. If I try and run that now, fingers crossed that I haven't done something silly because we're just ad hoc hacking away, but DAX Studio is now, it did a quick read through that query before it executed it looking for emitted parameters, and it found one called color. So I can put in red and click OK and get an error. So that could be because I've injected it in a treat as. Try just. So if I filter all colors, and product color is equal to and I've missed my comma again. So that query is now run and should have given us the red products. So that's got what, 1.2 million. So if I run that again, I think black's another color that's used. So instead of 1.2, we've now got 1.1. So this sort of syntax is something you'll often see used in paginated reports. The report builder product will generate queries with parameters. If you've used SQL Server reporting services, even back in 2012, we were using this syntax against tabular models, which was one thing that led to this feature, because it was, you're constantly, if you're trying to test parameters, you're constantly copying and pasting and then having to hard code in values to check things. So that was one of the motivations behind adding that. The other thing you can do if you're doing a lot of testing and this dialog gets pointing is you can write out this parameter XML. I might cancel that. So what that's done is that's added this little parameter block. This is actually like an XMLA block with the parameter name, and then in here is the value. Zoom in a bit. The reason I've chosen this particular syntax is that if you ever run a SQL profiler and capture queries run by paginated reports, the query start event will have the parameter in this format. So we were able to, when we're doing performance tuning or debugging issues with reports, we're able to capture the query start event using Profiler and then paste it straight into DAX Studio, because we'd get it straight as this and you could execute it. So now, because this color parameter has a matching definition in this block, it should just execute without prompting. We should be able to edit that text and then run it with blue figures, and we'll see if the figures change. And if you decide you don't want this parameter block, we've actually got a query, a little button up here that called Merge XML. And that simply takes that XML block from the bottom of the query and pushes the value in. Yeah, so I don't know if have we got any questions been coming in. I can sort of.
It's been quiet, but it might be worthwhile just talking a little bit about the difference between this and a tool like Tabular Editor, and what they may do in common, and when would you use one versus the other?
Yeah, so DAX Studio is very much a tool for connecting to a model with data in it and running evaluate statements in order to have a look and get data out. So we're very much about being able to run queries and show you the data from the model. So it's very much a query tool.
Very a tuning tool as well. It's a great environment for you to actually optimize and try alternative DAX syntax to make it run faster, isn't it, Darren? Yeah.
And testing, you can test variations of your expression very easily. Particularly now we've got the query builder, but even without that, you can type in different versions. Before the builder, I'd often manually come in and add a V2 that would do some different set of logic, and then I'd have to come down here and copy it. Give it a title of something different, then reference my V2, but yeah, it was a lot faster than having to go back into Power BI and then click add new measure and wait for the working on it, and then type expression in and then click save and wait for the little working on it, and then drag the new thing onto your onto a visual somewhere so you could see the output.
Whereas Tabular Editor is more for I don't know, I've seen it used to script the creation of measures or to find where measures are used in a model. Is that the point of difference, Darren? Yeah,
so Tabular Editor is all about the what's sort of an offline, but it's really about editing the model, about creating relationships, adding new columns, but he does it in a disconnected way. So you can add 10, 20 different measures. You can script the creation of measures. We've got a number of Tabular Editor scripts, because we use that as well, that we use for adding time intelligence. So adding month to date, year to date. We've got a suite of different time intelligence calcs that we add, and we can, we've got a script in Tabular Editor, and we can say, right click, add time intelligence, and it goes through and builds all of those month to date, year to date, month on month, year on year variation, percent increase, variance measures, and all of those. Tabular Editor is very much about editing your model, whereas DAX Studio is about querying the model and seeing the data. And like Phil said, that can have, particularly with performance tuning, because the cardinality of your data and the different columns can have a big impact on performance. So we've got a bunch of different features. In fact, I think part of the Power BI tips series, Marco did like a whole hour talking about server timings and query plans. And I think he did a second hour talking about the view metrics. So the SQL BI guys, Marco and Alberto, have had a product called Vertipack Analyzer, which was an Excel spreadsheet. So we've got a light version of that now running inside. Might close down the query editor. That gives you a quick way of seeing the sizes and the cardinality of your model. So I can see I have 18,000 customers. And they take out 3.8 meg. So this is just a little demo of AdventureWorks. So it's quite a small model. I can see this is the percent of database. So this customer is 26% of my model. And then inside there, I can see the email address is taking up, out of that 3.8 meg, it's taking nearly a meg just to hold email addresses. So that can be one thing where you can say, do I actually need to do analysis by email address? Or do I need both the customer ID and the alternate customer ID? Possibly not. So you can look at eliminating columns that aren't used. You can look at sometimes splitting columns into, if you've got a date time column, they are highly distinct, but if you get a date and a time split into two different columns, you can have a lot of savings in terms of your compression. And depending on how you use that column, sometimes that may or may not be a strategy you can employ. But this, the other thing is you can export this metrics to a VPAX file. That's just a zip file, and it's got all of this data stored in little JSON files inside it. So you can import that into the full-blown Vertipack Analyzer that's got a few more bells and whistles. But generally, the light version inside DAX Studio has all of the core metrics that you could use to analyze what's using up the space in your model, which can be a handy thing. So there's a number of demos. Marco can spend a whole hour talking about this feature alone. In fact, he has. Yep. And I think they've done some shorter ones with the guys in a cube. So they've done some videos showing the column size and cardinality.
Darren, you showed the parameters before. I'm just thinking one of the issues I had sometimes is trying to understand what a measure is doing inside a particular visual, and I might take the measure and blow bits of it apart in DAX Studio, but I'm missing that filter context from the visual. So I'm always forever going in and adding where year equals this and where this equals that. Is that parameter stuff you showed before just an easy way to do that, perhaps, to try and work out, well, I know I've got a weird result at this particular junction on this line chart with this particular axis. I'll chuck in a parameter and then I'll change it. Would that help with that? Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, so if you wanted to do a couple of different runs, looking at a few different variations, you could replace that hard-coded string with a parameter, and then DAX Studio will prompt you for it when you run. The other thing you can do, oh no, you wouldn't see. I was going to say the other thing we do that people might not be aware of is that In fact, I don't think I can have 2 define blocks. You can have 2. I think you only have the 1 define in a query, but you can have multiple evaluate clauses that'll return different tables. So I could make one blue, I could make the other red. And Power BI Desktop, some of the visuals make use of this if they need to show a detail and maybe they need to calculate the total slightly differently. They can generate 2 evaluate queries in the one and send it in the one batch. So if I click run on that, you'll see over on the left, there's 2 result sets. So this will be the blue, and this other one, number 2 here, will be the red. So I don't actually know if there's I think I've tested with 15 or 16 evaluate statements until I got to the point where a scroll bar appears here on the left where the numbers are. So it supports quite a lot of multiple results, but they do get sent as a single batch. So I think if you did turn on the server timings, you'd only see one lot of timings. You won't get times per query, I think. But server timings is another feature you can sort of spend an hour talking about that gathers detail about all of the little events that go on behind the scenes to evaluate a query. Yeah, so even though this is 2 queries, it's generated 3 queries against the storage engine. Interesting to see if we comment out that second one, what will it go down to? It goes down to 2 queries. Oh yeah, so it's generating one that gives it the distinct combination of gender and marital status.
Hey, so Darren, we've got too much more time left. I'm interested to know what would probably be the feature that you personally use the most in DAX Studio in your day job, or helping people out on forums. What's your probably number one most used feature?
Oh, it's
The
interesting.
format query.
Yeah, the format queries is probably a handy one that uses actually uses daxformatter.com to do the formatting. So the query builder does very basic formatting. It'd be interesting to see if it changes. Tell it to format this query. Yes, it's wrapped some of the longer lines just to change the formatting. But yeah, that can be a huge help, because often on forums and stuff, people will just paste all sorts of things in, and you get statements that look very much like this, with everything bunched up on one line, and it can be very difficult to read. So being able to just paste it into DAX Studio, format the query, and then it puts it out into a lot more readable formatting. I use the swap delimiters occasionally, because there is a feature now in Power BI Desktop where you can standardize on the US format delimiters, but there are still a lot of people that from Europe where they use, instead of commas, they use semicolons, and instead of, when you're using decimal, they use commas instead of full stops. So DAX Studio has a feature where it'll flick through and switch. So this is now using the European format. All of the delimiters are set as semicolons, and I can swap them back and forwards. So sometimes I've even had, there it goes. I've even had issues where, someone's posted something, even using AdventureWorks as an example. So I could potentially run it, but all of their delimiters are using the European format, so it can be quite tedious to go through and change those by hand. So there's a bunch of little things like that I use. But yeah, there's heaps of features in DAX Studio that I probably don't use on a regular basis. I even had a bug from Chris Webb recently where there was a certain combination of actions. I think if you're connected to Power BI Desktop and you close that, and then you also closed the last tab here, it caused a crash. So yeah, there's a few certain combinations just sort of being an open source, largely one-man band developed product of certain combinations of things I don't do.
And have you got anything exciting in the horizon that we can look forward to, that you're working away on, or a sort of a anything that you can share?
There's a few different things. I'm looking at better integration with Power BI. So at the moment, if you were to connect, you sort of have to go and grab your Power BI workspace and go and look up that connection string and paste that in. So I'm looking at some options for connecting better to Power BI and improving that sort of workflow. I'm also talking with Marco, about can we improve some of the smart screen things that block us, saying that we might be a malicious program.
Yeah, I definitely I got that last time I downloaded DAX Studio. There's about 3 things you have to go past to get it installed.
Yeah, and we do have, the only thing I've got at the moment is just documentation that Gilbert helped me get some screenshots for. So under documentation, there is Windows 10 Smart Screen. Sort of explain what it is and why it's lying to us, because it says it might not be signed, but it definitely, DAX Studio definitely is signed. I often use VirusTotal for checking. I do all of the builds on an AppVeyor build server. So in theory, it's a clean VM that's spun up that gets Visual Studio installed, and then it builds DAX, it pulls DAX Studio code from GitHub, builds it and pops out an installer at the end that's all signed, which sort of takes away the possibility that if my machine gets infected, then I could infect an installer. So hopefully it's clean, but yeah, I often check using VirusTotal because that runs about 80 different antivirus engines. But it does come up with these warnings saying it could harm your device. You have to click keep, and then when you install, it says, no, it really could hurt your device. It's not commonly downloaded, and you have to click show more and say keep anyway. And then you finally get through where it's it does know that it's signed by me. It's got me listed as the publisher. And then you have to click run anyway, and eventually you get to the point where it will actually start the installer. But yeah, that's a bit painful. I have been trying to talk to a few people at Microsoft and see what we can do about that. But yeah, it's not simple, and I can see why they do it. I mean, in theory, it's even 30 or 40,000 downloads is not a lot when you've got billions of people on the planet. But yeah, it's frustrating, especially when you put out a new release and it warns people that it's not commonly downloaded.
And we might be getting a DAX Studio button inside Power BI Desktop soon. Is that?
Yeah. So there
something
is
to look out for, possibly.
That is coming soon, and Christian Wade did demo that at
something recent.
Yeah, at MBAS, I think. So you will see this new external tools ribbon appear, and both DAX Studio, Tabular Editor, and Christian's tool, ALM Toolkit, are 3 of the tools that have sort of been part of the pilot program. So currently, if you open DAX Studio, you'd have to pick which Power BI file you want to connect to and then click connect, whereas opening it from that button will launch me up, and it's launching on my other screen, directly connected to this model.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So you can see this has got messy names of dim customer, dim date, and it's picked up this metadata. DAX Studio is also showing you all of the internal tables. You can right click and hide those hidden objects, so now it matches more with the one on the left, apart from a slight difference. They've sorted metrics to the top. I should look at fixing that. But yes, you will sometimes find issues on the GitHub page that I raised for myself to make sure that I don't forget to fix things like that I see during demos and explanations to people.
Cool.
I try and keep track of all that stuff on the GitHub issues page.
Well, that's been a really interesting walkthrough, Darren. So I think what we'll do is we'll pause now for questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's been a huge amount come through the chat window.
We've got one, David Wilson, asking if you could demo the performance timing piece. We've seen Phil whiz through it, but it'd be nice to see it again.
The server timings piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, not that window, that's Power BI. One of the links I've got in the this Power BI tips videos. There's currently 4 videos in that playlist. I do an introduction and why would you use DAX Studio, and that takes about an hour.
Yeah.
Marco does a whole hour on the Vertipack Analyzer. He also does a whole hour on using server timings to tune a model, and I do another hour that covers some of the other miscellaneous features that I've shown today, like the parameters box, the parameters prompt, and the import export, and whole bunch of other little define and replace, some of the flexible layouts, like all of these windows you can move around. I don't think I even showed the query history, but each query I've run gets saved in the query history. So if you've ever, I know I've been in the situation where I've been playing with a measure and I've typed something and, oh, that's a little bit better, and then I change it and it gets worse, and go, oh, what did I have 3 attempts ago? You can actually sort of go back through your history and say, oh, there's the one that was 13 milliseconds, and you can delete what's in there and say, I want that version back, and double click on it, and it gets you back to where you were. You can bring that history back. So that's probably another sort of handy little hidden feature that people aren't aware of, or may not be aware of if you don't use it all the time.
Excellent.
But understanding server timings, it's easy enough to switch it on, but
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's probably worth looking at some of the longer videos on that.
We've got another question. Can you drag multiple measures columns into the query builder window, or do you have to do them one by one?
Yeah, I haven't figured out that yet. I'd like to be able to do that. At the moment, it's one by one, but yeah, there's no, I haven't figured out a shift click or anything like that. So you just have to, you can definitely keep going berserk and
Sure.
dragging a lot in, and you can reorder them if you don't like the order they're in.
One of my questions are I always end up having to search for online, or try and or ring Phil up and ask him is the shorthand to evaluate a measure, to return a measure in DAX Studio. Can you just remind me? I can never remember what it is.
Yeah, so we can. Well, the query builder will do it too now. So
Excellent.
if I do a Control A and delete that. Oh, that's probably complicated because I've got a date filter in there. So if you get rid of the date filter, oh, it's still got calculate table in there. That's a bug. So one of the simpler ones is to do just calculate row, because I've got that override in there too. This works back to like 2016 and Power Pivot will understand evaluate row. I think even 2012 understands evaluate row. There isn't even shorter syntax, which is the newer what do they call that? That's sort of a table
constructor.
Yeah, where the curly braces effectively constructs a table that has just one column of internet sales. So that's the fastest way of just doing a single measure quickly without having to evaluate row as more backward compatible, because that syntax is newer, but then you have to give it a name. Oh, and I've still got my edited syntax in here.
Cool. So we've probably got time for one more question. What do you think?
I don't think we have any more. Last orders questions.
Oh yeah, Jonathan's got one.
Hi Darren. We're using shared data sets at work, so we build reports through Live Connection. But I love using DAX Studio to build complicated measures. But you can't connect DAX Studio to a report that's using Live Connection, can you? And to sort of query the model underneath. Because we don't have premium, so we can't use XML read.
Yeah, so you'd have to. Yeah, that's one of the issues, is that DAX Studio connects to data models, and when you're in Live Connect, the actual Live Connect doesn't have a data model. It talks on to the other one, which can be an issue when you've got measures in your Live Connect model. I'm experimenting with. There is a way of connecting using the same endpoint that Analyze in Excel uses, but that uses a different connection library to what DAX Studio uses. We're using the ADOMD client, which is a .NET based one, whereas Analyze in Excel uses OLADB. So I'm keep watching this space, because I'm hoping to be able to connect to pro workspaces.
Awesome.
But probably the only other thing you could do would be if you can open the shared data set data model in desktop locally, you could at least debug a measure against the local workbook. But it depends how big your model gets, and so that's one area that I'm sort of experimenting with at the moment as well. But it's painful because they only support the native connections, not the .NET connections, and DAX Studio is all .NET. But I do have some prototypes in that area that I'm experimenting with that are showing promise.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Darren. That was really interesting and informative. It's certainly nice to see a product that I use quite heavily driven by an expert. And it's nice to see that it's going to continue to get better and better. So in terms of wrapping up today, just thanks again. Thanks for Microsoft for hosting the facilities and the hub for the brave souls that actually joined us. We got probably more than I was expecting here tonight. Sorry there was no pizza. But on that subject, if you could please provide some feedback to Jeff, Jonathan and myself, so that we can decide whether we want to go fully back to in-person meetups at the end of each month, or whether we stick to this hybrid type model. I think there's pros and cons with each, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, if we hear nothing, we'll probably just we'll decide before the next meetup. Equally, if there's anything else you'd like to hear about, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll see if we can find some content on that. But other than that, we'll reconvene again last Tuesday of July. So thanks again, Darren. I guess a round of applause. And I'll catch up with you later. So I'm going to stop the recording now. And for those that do want to just linger and chit chat afterwards in a network, we've got quite a few old hands here. You're very welcome to. But otherwise, thanks everyone for joining. See you again.
Thank you, Darren.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me.
See ya.